Welcome to the NUS Conference 2020 Election Hustings for Vice President Further Education, or VP-FE, as some of you will know it. I'm your host, Kami Nzerum, and joining me today are your three election candidates. Salsa Beal, or Salsa El Megri, from Bradford College Students' Union. Hi, Salsa.
Hello.
Aldrich Gonsalves, Dudley College of Technology Students' Union. Hi, Aldrich.
Hello.
And Peter Hopwood, Godalming College Students' Association. Hi, Peter.
Hello there.
Thanks all of you for joining us, and thanks to all of you students who have sent in your questions for the candidates to answer, so you can decide who you want to represent you in your union. Before we get to the questions, first we want to hear from each of the candidates. Why do you want to represent the union, VP-FE? Starting, we will have Salsa. Why do you want to be the VP?
So being the educational officer at a developed FE institution helped me to understand just what is needed for FE students across the UK. From being involved in the NUS for almost 2 years, I have seen the organisation has become the National Students of Higher Education students. FE has been tokenised and placed on the back burner, and I want to ensure that we are equal, that we are an equal voice in the NUS and always on the agenda. We need a VP-FE that is visible to all students when neglected, both in the NUS circles and wider conversations about education in the sector. With the current trajectory of cuts to further education, it is essential that we have a choice that's not only part of the conversation, but forcing the change on our terms.
Salsa, thank you very much indeed for your introduction. Next, Aldrich, why do you want to be Vice President?
I believe FE is vibrant, diverse, and progressive, and I want this to reflect in the quality of work in NUS, fighting for FE and our rights to be heard. For too long, we have been ignored and marginalized in NUS, but we make up the largest section of the membership. I will be a VP that connects with you, listens to your concerns, and fight harder on your behalf. Vote Aldrich Gonsalves.
I'm sorry. Let's try that one again. Thank you very much indeed, Aldrich. Peter, why do you want to be VP Further Education?
Well, the reality for further education is that we form the vast majority of NUS membership, with almost 2/3 of membership. It's a diverse sector. We have sixth form colleges, we have further education colleges, and we have apprentices. And the reality is that each one of them has their own needs. But what I've encountered for the past year as president of my students' union is that teachers are underpaid far more than their counterparts in schools and colleges and universities. And what we find is that the funding doesn't go far enough in providing essential maintenance, and student living costs are still on the rise, with travel costs rising and no future for our students in these things going down. I want to see our union representing further education, all areas. Vote Peter for FE.
Thanks to all of you for setting out your stalls and telling us so clearly what you think you can bring to the party. It's a really, really important role. And to our first question, I'm going to ask Salsa to respond first. It comes from Crawley College. So thank you to Crawley College for submitting this. What is it, Salsa, that you think about the student voice and student voices being heard that is so important? What makes you want to engage in this process?
So personally, I was a student rep at my college before I became a SAB, and I think student voice is such a powerful thing. I think engaging with students with with different experiences is very important, as we get to know what is going well within our colleges and what isn't going well, and to further develop the college by listening to the voices of our students.
Aldrich, would you agree? Aldrich, would you agree?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that.
And what do you think is so important then for you personally about engaging the student voice?
For me personally, the most important thing is the positive difference I make in people's life. I feel really happy when that happens. I'm from India, so back in India, student voice is heavily controlled by the institution or the college and not by the students. Over here, I feel I have the choice to choose which topic I want to go forward with, such as environment is very close to my heart. So that's the thing I really love about student voice over here.
Thanks, Aldrich. And Peter, tell us a little bit more about your experience of amplifying the student voice.
Well, I think it's evident that when all of our voices come together, you can shift the power, the balance of power, both on a local level and a national level. And I think the National Union of Students has been really strong in being able to make so many achievements for students when we all work together. And for me personally, I think that as VPFE, one of the most important things in reaching out and making that change is having strong communication and bringing people together. And representation is good, but actions speak louder than words. And I'm really passionate about reaching out to people and bringing our collective voices together so we can achieve real change.
Peter, thanks very much. And it's interesting hearing from all of you, this message of working together is so strong. I'm really interested, Peter, in what you just said about action speaking louder than words. And I think the electorate is going to want to hear from all of you about what those actions should be. And that takes us on to our second question. And we're going to ask Aldrich to respond to this first. Our second question comes from the University of Bristol Students' Union and the Students' Union from Royal Holloway in London. So, Aldrich, what would your approach be to working with stakeholders, that collaboration piece, such as FE institutions, regulators, and other relevant organizations to achieve the positive change for students that you all say you want and gain credibility for the NUS to compromise and achieve, so actually do stuff rather than simply campaign? Aldrich, how would you do that?
I believe now is the key time that the organization can support one another. Give each other guidance, and everyone is under pressure, and we need to keep.
That's all right. Take your time.
I'm sorry about this.
It's fine. You're in an FE institution at the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how would you suggest working better with an institution such as your own to get better deals for students and make their experience of student life better?
Okay, so I'll tell you something that we are doing right now in Students' Union, in Dudley College Students' Union. This was brought up by Dan, the previous president.
Yeah, we've still got you. Keep going.
So this project was brought up by Dan, the previous president, and me. It was called the Black Country Students' Union, which basically means all the colleges in the Black Country come together, campaign together, and support each other. So this was one of the campaigns that I took on myself, and we were going forward with it. And I am working with NUS to get some help. So basically, I believe when the FE institution come together, we can achieve more than just one college campaigning for it, such as Lava College is a really good example. Like so many colleges coming together, signing up the pledge cards and stuff like that. made a massive difference. Now the government is having talks about getting more funding for colleges. So I believe if we do such things, I think we can achieve more than just one college trying to achieve it.
Aldrich, thanks very much. Really interesting hearing about what you've done in your own institution. Peter, working with stakeholders such as colleges, other educational organisations, what do you think you could do as VP FE?
So for me, from the moment I'm elected, I'll make sure that I'm building up those relationships with the other organisations that have involvement with the FE sector. I think it's really important to recognise the diverse nature of further education. As I said before, you know, you have your sixth form colleges, your apprentices, the bigger technical colleges, etc. And with that comes their own different campaign organisations and groups. And I think for the NUS, it's really important that we're building up relationships and building up common goals and common platforms and reaching out. And I also think, just on a bit of a side note, I think it's important to remember that a lot of trust in the NUS has been damaged over the years. And it's all good having these big campaigns, but I think as FTO, I'll really prioritise making sure that we build up good relationships with both the membership and these key stakeholders.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Salsa, managing those complex relationships, how would you go about it?
So I second what Peter was saying about having a good relationship with stakeholders. I'd like to engage with stakeholders to work with trade unions to better drive student voice within colleges. I'd want to work with local authorities to make recommendations on adding the importance of climate emergency into the curriculum. I'd want to work with organisations to tackle the youth violence, youth poverty, since they are a catalyst of each other. And also, I'd like to tackle sexual harassment within colleges and youth homelessness, and all, like, collectively work with these organisations to lobby government for funding towards FE colleges.
Salsa, thanks very much indeed. Great to hear your perspectives there. And I just want to go back to something that you said, Peter, and get you all to respond to it. This issue of the NUS and credibility. Obviously, you guys are at the younger end of the representative body. What do you see as the challenge to giving the NUS the credibility and the oomph that you all want it to have? How would you go about improving that?
So I think we need to start by actually communicating with the membership. I think, you know, it's fantastic that we have these big national campaigns. That's really important. But at the same time, that can be quite meaningless to a lot of colleges that face their own struggles and don't feel that their voice is heard. So as the further education representative, I'll make sure that I'm actually visiting the colleges and bringing to attention the needs that aren't always discussed. You know, when working with other stakeholders, you know, I'm at a sixth form college where we have the Sixth Form Colleges Association, and I feel that a lot of the issues that they're raising, the NUS could also raise, but they're not doing enough of that. So I think that the VPFE needs to be someone who can reach out and visit these colleges and get to understand the different issues before they move on to these really ambitious campaigns.
Thanks, Peter. Aldrich, credibility. How would you deal with that?
I totally agree with Peter. That's true that our members are not represented very well in the NUS. That's what we feel. When last year when we went for the national conference, that's what my team said to me, that we were not well represented. It was all about HE. So as Peter said, my plans are similar to him, going to all the visiting colleges around the country. Not just visiting them, but if possible, I could do Skype calls, sending them emails, phone calls, setting up WhatsApp groups. These are the stuff that I want to do for our FE community over here.
Thanks, Aldrich. Salsa, anything to add on credibility? The credibility piece is really important.
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I feel like I feel like NUS has glamorized campaigns so much that people don't actually see that action has been taken. So I feel like we should glamorize action rather than campaigning.
And that leads us very nicely on to our next question. That tricky balance between campaigning and action and actually having an impact, given the political and social and economic situation we find ourselves in. This question comes from SOAS Students' Union, and Peter will respond first. How should, in your view, the National Union of Students engage with the new Conservative government to best benefit FE members? How are you going to work with the new government to work with the younger members of the student body?
Well, I think anyone that knows me personally will know that the election went opposite to the way I'd hoped, but we've got to deal with the hand we're given. And the reality is that this current government have made a lot of ambitious claims, which the NUS works best when it holds government to account and can work on furthering the needs of its membership. So I'm open to, working with, other organizations and holding the government to account and, talking to the government. And, I hope that they're sincere about their promises, because we need as much support we can get as a sector. But I think the NUS works best when we can hold them to account and actually communicate with other organizations to deliver.
Thank you, Peter. Salsa, what are your views on working with the new Conservative government, whatever your political persuasions?
Sadly, we have politicians and leaders within our current government who have repeatedly said hateful remarks towards marginalized groups. We just have to keep in mind that they've created hostile immigration policies that's made it hard for asylum seekers and accompanied asylum seekers to adjust within the FE sector. We just have to keep in mind the cuts towards youth organizations and mental health services. However, they are the ones who hold funding and they are the ones who influence policy, but we have to take a stance on their outlook and work with them in a principled manner.
Indeed, and of course, were the government here to represent themselves, I'm sure they would say the education sector has to pay for itself. It can't be a permanent black hole on the nation's finances. That said, they're not here to answer questions on their policy. This space is for you to talk about how you will work with them. So on to Aldrich. How would you work with the current Conservative government in the interests of FE students?
I would say that the conversations that NUS has already had with the government should continue on, regardless which party is in place. If it's Labour, if it's Conservative, if it's Green, it doesn't matter. I think we should carry on the conversations we have, because if that conversation breaks down, then it would take a whole nother effort for us to go back and restart the conversations there. I would also encourage all the student union around the country to lobby their MPs, because in the end of the day, the MPs would be making the decisions in the parliament. So if we do lobby the MPs, it's going to be great for us, and we could always keep the conversation going on in the parliament, such as the Love Our College campaign.
Aldrich, thank you. And I just want to dig a little bit deeper then on your views around working with government and the range of options you think are open to the student body. In one of the other hot hustings, we talked a little bit about how far one should go with direct action strikes, etc. And bearing in mind what this government has pledged in terms of funding or not. And also acknowledging that some of the most effective social campaigns of the moment, the climate campaign, has been largely led by young people. I just want to start with you in the same order. Peter, what are your views on working with negotiation, compromise, all the way through to direct action and encouraging things like the climate strike?
Well, I think the reality is that strikes are a last resort. People don't, it's often a situation that is quite desperate, but for things like climate change, it's a desperate situation. And I feel really encouraged by the fact that young people are taking the initiative to actually go out there and make a statement. You know, you can't ignore that. You know, my preference is for building bridges. You know, I believe in kind of a collaborative or constructive way of approaching things. But I think, as Salsa said, we are facing a government that has been very hostile, has made, you know, massive cuts to education, and is leaving a lot of colleges in the dark about the future. So there's a time and a place for working with other organisations that can hold the government to account. And I think, you know, strikes, they're the last resort. But I think on issues like climate change, they've been absolutely necessary in bringing forward the argument.
And Salsa, for you, strikes also the last resort, or would you want to be more proactive?
I totally agree. This is why I feel like negotiations is very important. So this is why I think us as NUS should collaborate with local authorities and trying to implement this within the education system, so as part of the curriculum for future generations to come.
Thank you, Salsa. Aldrich, where do you stand?
I totally agree with Salsa, to be honest. Climate change is very close to my heart, and I do believe strikes are the last resort for students or anyone in particular. But I also believe that rather than just blaming it on the government, I believe we as a person should take a responsibility as well. So in my college, we changed the packaging and stuff like that. We hold the college at account as saying that reduce our carbon footprint. The college agreed to it, and now the plastic packaging is converted into reusable and biodegradable packaging. We also planted different trees. I would really encourage all the students' union to follow the tree charter, because it's really helpful. And coming to strikes, I also think that we should get signatures, because if we get way over 100,000 signatures, then it is a talk in the parliament. So I think that would help as well.
Aldrich, thanks very much indeed. On to the next question, which comes from Derwin College Students' Union. And it's almost certainly something that you three see with your own eyes, as you have, of course, a different entry point to the students' representative body than a lot of the other candidates in this election who come from different parts of the student body. The question is this, and we will start with Salsa. With more student unions from specialist colleges joining the NUS, how do you think you'll support them to be involved in NUS democracy and events, given, this is the crucial bit, given their wide range of learning difficulties and disabilities? A really, really important question.
So for me personally, I'd want to host some feedback sessions with these specialist colleges to see where NUS is doing well and areas of improvement, and really listen to their concerns. I'd like to possibly start and introduce a specialist grant to support them to be able to attend all the NUS democracy events as much as possible. I'd want to work closely with NatSpec, who offer specialist provisions for students with learning difficulties and disabilities, and to get their advice on how to make our spaces accessible and more inclusive.
And accessibility and inclusion, of course, are so important when we talk about democracy. Aldrich, what would you do to help specialist colleges engage in student representation?
So I know that NUS have had so much advice and guidance over and over again from LDD colleges and students, but I don't know how far it's implemented. But giving an example from our college, we have a disability committee, and they are hosting a forum at the moment. So in that forum, we made sure that students who are deaf have an interpreter in there. We have Braille literature. We also have fact cards that show images to LDD students. So I believe these are the things that need to be introduced in conferences, in the meetings that NUS hosts as well.
Thanks, Aldrich. Peter, much experience in this area?
Well, so I come from a much smaller college. So for us, there's far fewer people with, just in terms of raw numbers with, learning difficulties and disabilities and things. But, I think it's important that every college is an accessible space. And with that, the NUS needs to be campaigning to make sure that colleges have the funding and the support in place that they need. I think it's important to remember that FE is such a diverse sector, so every voice is always welcome and every voice needs to be heard. And for me, I'm passionate about building bridges and communicating with every single member, because it's really important that in a democracy, everyone has access to it.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. On to the next question, also about inclusion and integration. And Aldrich, I'm going to ask you to respond to this one first. It comes from Heriot Watt Students' Union. How will you, Aldrich, ensure the NUS works with other youth organisations and charities to achieve its goals? And I know you've all spoken a little bit about how you think this would work, but this is an opportunity to go a bit deeper. So Aldrich, how would you ensure the NUS works with other youth organisations and charities to achieve its goals?
So NUS really needs to make those connections. I think some of the work NUS have carried out in the past could be benefited by linking up with other charities or other organizations. It would be much more stronger if it had. Making those links is very important for getting those relationships going. Looking at the mutual benefits, NUS could learn a lot from these organizations.
Thank you, Aldrich. Peter, youth groups and other similar organizations, charities, how are you going to work with them?
Well, so I think in regards to the question and, talking about this idea of, working with other groups and things, I think it's about, building up a common platform, recognizing the things we have in common. I think if you look at a lot of these groups, these organizations, we have more in common on so many issues than we realize. And I think we work best when we're able to recognize that and start building a common platform. As I said earlier, I believe in a cooperative way of doing things. I think that building bridges with other groups is best when we're trying to move forwards.
Thank you, Peter. Salsa, youth groups, subject close to your heart?
Yes, so I second what both were saying. Definitely building bridges and recognizing things in common. For me, I'd want to work with the British Youth Council, the British Youth Parliament, who have connections with local authorities to make change to FE. And by making change, I mean working together to lobby government for more funding towards these organisations and to tackle the main issue that we are facing, which is youth violence and youth homelessness and poverty. I also want to work with charities such as MenCat by analysing their statistics and research to help support students with learning difficulties and possibly working with them on an education collaboration, basically on the prevalence of learning difficulties within FE, and also working with other charities like Young Minds and Minds UK to help smoothen the transition between moving from a young person's mental health service to an adult provision. So yeah, I think it's really, really important to build these connections and possibly just going to each other's workshops as well to find out what we have in common and work together on that.
Absolutely. It's worth noting the pressures on young people and students are high across the board, and the groups that you mentioned that work with welfare across the board are so important. We all know that. Another question on inclusion and integration, and it's worth noting, of course, that in the three candidates we have here, we get across the country. We've got Dudley, we've got Bradford, and we've got Surrey as well. This question, which comes from the City of Liverpool College Students' Union, Durham Students' Union, Bedford's College Group Students' Union and Students' Union UCL. We're going to go to Peter first on this. So thinking about that issue around inclusion and geography, what will you do to make all students feel included in the NUS, such as apprentices and those in institutions further away from Westminster, the regionalism? How are you going to connect with students all over the country, perhaps studying things that are non-traditionally, not academic in the traditional sense?
So I just want to start by saying I was really excited to see that the National Society of Apprentices has affiliated with the NUS. I think that's a really important step, and I'm really excited to see them being incorporated into that further education family within the NUS. But I think in regards to making everyone feel welcome regardless of geography, I think we need to stop just focusing on these big campaigns and marches on Westminster. The reality is that most colleges, whilst these campaigns can be important and can affect them, a lot of them don't always reflect their views or their needs, and actually the NUS isn't necessarily delivering for them. And so for me as VP FE, I'm committed to making sure that we're communicating with every college around the country. A lot of members don't even come to conference. I think that's really disappointing. And I think we really need to encourage engagement with the NUS. And we can only do that when we're putting aside some of these campaigns and actually making the effort to visit them and hear about what they need.
Salsa, how will you go about developing these relationships? Will you be pounding the streets, going one end of the country to another?
Yes, I'm very passionate about that. I'd like to hold feedback sessions with everyone. To hold open feedback sessions to understand the needs of apprentices, because they have like acute needs, and obviously for all the colleges around the UK. I'd want to make constitutional changes within the NUS to help accommodate for apprentices and colleges. I'd like to also hold roundtable discussions with youth services, charities, local authorities, and colleges that aren't centralised around Westminster and London to drive student voice across the whole country.
And Aldrich, from your vantage point in Dudley, how will you do this?
Yeah, I'll start saying about how to include the apprentices. So in our union, we have an apprentice officer. The apprentice officer is sending out surveys to all the apprentices across West Midlands, because Dudley is the largest provider of apprentices in the West Midlands. So we will be sending out surveys to everyone. So this will show apprentices that they are included in our students' union. I would highly encourage all students' union to have an apprentice rep and do similar surveys. I do understand that they are in college once a week and not more than that. But this is very important to get their views and to represent their views as well. And saying about going to one city to another to represent all the unions, yes, I would do it. I would love to do it. I would like to go outside and meet other union presidents as well and discuss what issues their institution is facing specifically and try to solve it or try to come up with an idea that everybody's satisfied with.
Lots of talking. And on that note, on to the next question. Clearly, the NUS as an organisation has changed significantly. This is a question that comes from Queen Mary University, London, and it's going to go first to Salsa. What will you do differently to your predecessors to engage with students more directly, as well as their students' unions? What has the National Union of Students got to learn? How's it got to change to improve?
Yeah, so I realised that there is newsletters from the president, not from the vice president in further education. So I'd like to have a social media presence through the FE newsletter, so students are aware of issues regarding FE and what updates we have. I'd like to communicate with FE officers to give them the tool and the knowledge on how to make effective change within their SU and colleges. and make reasonable adjustments. As you are all aware of the current pandemic, a lot of things have been postponed. So I want to put adjustments and contingencies in plan. So God forbid, if something like this ever happens again, we are still able to reach out to other colleges and still be in contact with them, and we're not missing out on campaigns, on negotiations, etc.
Salsa, thanks. So using social media is one solution. Aldrich, what are you going to do differently that the union perhaps hasn't done in the past? How are you going to communicate and engage with your members more directly?
So this is another thing that my students union personally does very well. We have a website, we have social media presence, we send out emails, newsletters, messages. So I would like to do something similar. I would like to cast a broader net rather than just relying on newsletters and emails. I would go to WhatsApp, social medias in general, emails, newsletters. Have a separate page on NUS. I know they do, but I would try to get it a bit out there that people know this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm working for them. So everybody knows what I will be working on.
Aldrich, thank you. So both of you talking clearly about communication. Peter, for you, what are you going to do differently?
Well, as I said earlier, communication for me is really important. But further to that, actions speak louder than words. And I think for a lot of unions, they're feeling failed by the NUS. They're not feeling that their issues are listened to. With many unions, their issues are quite nuanced. With mine, we don't have a budget. We don't get paid. We're volunteers. And what I want to see the NUS delivering on, and as VPFE, this is something that I'm committed to, is actually listening to some of these more nuanced concerns and actually not only communicating, but following up. And actually just a second point that hasn't really been touched upon yet is we also need to be working with the nations and the devolved NUS. So NUS Wales, NUS Scotland, and NUS in Northern Ireland. And we need to actually be working with these different frameworks and not only communicating, which is really important, but actually building that up with action. So that's really important to me.
Actions speak louder than words, a phrase that we have heard frequently because the role that all three of you are going for, you want to have an impact. This is not just a talking shop, after all. We're going to come to Salsa for the next question first, which comes from the University of Wolverhampton Students' Union. And I'm going to ask you to think about a group of students that perhaps you haven't spent that much time thinking about, but one day, maybe you will be one. Here is the question. More than 30% of students are over 35 years of age. Of them, more than 50% are over 40. But the needs of mature students are often forgotten. How would you go about increasing the representation of older students and hold the government to account for them? We'll start with you, Salsa.
Yeah. The majority of our students are mature students. So we have a massive ESOL department, and they're all mature students. For me, I'm very passionate into ring fencing the 19 plus funding. What that means is, so the government gives, let's say, £10 million into a college. And then the college can say, well, we want 5 million of that to go towards 19 plus funding. So I think that should be protected because the 14 to 18 funding is protected, 19 plus funding should be as well. I want to support and encourage SUs to introduce the Mature Students Officer to help representation. I'd like to develop workshops on engagement and representation with a specific material to mature students.
Thank you, Salsa. Very, very well considered. Peter, mature students, how are you going to represent them?
Well, in regards to what Salsa said, a mature officer wouldn't be possible in my case because we only cater for 16 to 19-year-olds.
Right,
But
right.
having said that, when I was at the NUS conference last year, I was actually, this it's a bit of a story here, but I was really touched by the fact that there was a mature officer, and they proposed a motion to conference campaigning for 16 to 17-year-old rail cards. And for me, that was quite a touching moment, because what I saw was a fellow student, someone who wouldn't have been directly impacted by that policy, but campaigning for my rights to get better travel. And the reality is that our union works best when every single student works together. And so, I'm not here saying that my college caters for mature students and I can necessarily personally relate to those issues, but I'm someone who I'm absolutely committed to recognizing the needs of students and working with every student to deliver on their needs. And I think it's an area that isn't talked about enough. But for me, that moment at conference was really important in opening my eyes to the real broad range of students that the NUS caters for. And particularly within further education, our voice doesn't get heard enough already. So it's really important that we stand up for one another.
And this message of collaboration and understanding the needs across the student population, we're hearing this again and again from all of you. Aldrich will get an opportunity to respond to that question, but he has had to go temporarily. Hopefully he'll be back in a moment. But we're going to move on to the next question. And Peter, you'll have a chance to answer this one first. It comes from Edge Hill Students' Union. And I would just like to point out how impressed I think everyone will be with how collegiate and supportive the candidates have been of one another and how polite this discussion is. And that's really important because we're building a union that is respectful and builds for the future. But I want to ask you something, Peter. What do you have that the other candidates don't?
Well, firstly, I hope everyone's impressed by my amazing hair. I mean, my nickname is Ed Sheeran, and that's a point that I won't cease to be proud of. But I mean, on a more serious note, I'm president of a students' union where I don't get paid to do what I do. I do it because I want to help the students. I want to be supporting the very people that I was elected to serve. And that goes for the same with being VPFE. I don't understand necessarily the same experiences as Aldrich and Salsa. But for me, I have had my experiences and I will absolutely stand up for everyone. And that's something that is really important to me, is communication, building up strong relationships. And that's with anyone, whoever they are within our sector.
Thanks, Peter. Well, we already know that Salsa can sing, as can Ed Sheeran, but in the context of being VP FE, Salsa, what have you got that the other candidates don't?
So as a Muslim woman of color who has been subjected to various types of discrimination, this has helped me build resilience. And basically, I have a strong and personal commitment to support students who have gone through discrimination or neglect within the education sector. I'd like to support mature students who have felt isolated because they feel like they need to care. Mature students who have caring responsibilities, who may feel like they need to choose between education or caring for their loved ones. I'd like to support students from working class backgrounds who might be struggling to come into college because of financial difficulties. And I'd also like to support students with disabilities who might feel like they don't, who might feel different because of the environment that's being because of the environment that college has created to make it feel not accessible.
And making education something that is comfortable and accessible for everybody is so important for building future generations of leaders, of course. Delighted to say we have Aldrich back. The question that we're dealing with at the moment, Aldrich, and bearing in mind how supportive of one another and how professional this entire campaign has been, I wanted to ask you a question that gives you a chance to put some water between you and your colleagues. What do you have that the other candidates do not?
First of all, I'd like to apologize for what happened. Secondly, I don't really know my opponents personally, so I don't want to comment on their abilities or anything like that, but I'm really sure that we all are passionate and committed people over here. Just by being here today shows that how passionate everybody is here. So so I won't really frame like firm like that because I'm getting nervous again.
That's all right, Aldrich.
I'm really sorry.
That's absolutely fine. Perhaps whilst you think of that, we can rewind to the question that unfortunately you missed around representing mature students. So I'll repeat the question so you have it. It comes from the University of Wolverhampton Students' Union, and this is to Aldrich because the other two candidates have had a chance to talk about this already. Aldrich, more than 30% of students are over 35 years of age. Of them, more than 50% are over 40. But the needs of mature students are, as we know, often forgotten. How would you go about increasing representation for older students and hold the government to account for them?
So in our union, most of my VP team are mature students. They're coming from vocational courses to HE to access to HE. So we have a wide range of students in our union. There is also a position where a mature student can be an officer and campaign for just mature students. This is what I will be again encouraging the other students union around the country to do as well, so that we know their needs and the problems. I do understand that some of the needs we do know what they are, but sometimes you don't get the full story. So coming to government, coming to holding the government to an account. I'm really sorry. I don't know what's happening now. I'm really sorry.
Aldrich, thank you so much for speaking so eloquently about what you have done in your college and what you hope to bring to a national position. And I think we've got time for one more question, guys, before we wrap. And I will give you an opportunity to make a concluding statement if you wish to. But before we get there, and we're going to start with Peter this time. This is a question from Liverpool Guild Students' Union. Starting with Peter. Peter, what will you do to help movement building on our campuses?
Well, any strong movement needs a strong student union to help support it. And that's why in my manifesto, I've committed to campaigning for fully funded, structurally independent, politically autonomous student unions in every further education provider. And it's something that is ambitious, and it's something that I'm determined that we really drive forwards, because it's unacceptable that so many unions, like my own, are under-resourced and we don't receive much support financially or politically necessarily always because of, you know, all these different constraints. And so for me, any movement needs a strong union behind it, and that's why I've committed to ensuring that every further education provider has a strong student union.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Aldrich, movement building on campus. We've heard Peter talk about proper funding and support for unions. What would you do to ensure movement building?
To ensure building a movement on campus where students can come together and do things that they care about is so important. FE students, this is so important about the big job of in FE is first of allowing FE students to see that they can do it. NUS needs to start connecting with all joined up FE members and mapping out all where they stand in terms of students of support, strategic understanding, and what NUS can and should be doing for them. Developing a base of representative group on campus is one of the key jobs FE needs.
Aldrich, thank you. Salsa, final word on the final question. Movement building, how are you going to do it?
Yes, so I've already outlined my priorities, but I feel like it is very important to honor these priorities and keep to my word. I want to turn my thoughts and ideas into reality, but more importantly, I want to but more importantly, I want the ideas shaped by the students. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. So I want to turn my thoughts and ideas into reality, but more importantly, the thoughts and ideas of students by collectively, to achieve them collectively as a movement, obviously to be approachable, an officer amongst students, for the students, not to just to listen to their voices, but to amplify their voices. This is by being accommodating, making sure that spaces we create are inclusive, so we can truly be a representative movement to drive collective student voice.
And I'm sure a collective student voice is something that you would all argue for. To conclude, Aldrich, would you like to provide us with your closing comments? Why should the electorate vote for you?
The electorate should vote for me, as I did loads of different campaigns in my own college. I changed many different things in my college. There were so many things that were pending for years, such as gender neutral toilet, a very big topic in our college. I would like to spread it out nationwide. I would like to make the difference that students care about, and not just NUS that cares about. But I would like to make a massive difference on connecting with all FE colleges.
Aldrich, thank you very much indeed. Salsa, final chance to persuade the electorate. Why should they vote for you?
So I believe you should vote for me because I really cherish FE colleges. I did my GCSEs at college, and I went and did access course at college. College is a place where a lot of people have an opportunity to change their lives. And I feel like I'd be the person to represent all kinds of people, to be able to address their concerns and reassure them in regards to their concerns. I'll be the driving force of student voice. And yeah, vote VP, Salsa for VP FE.
Thank you, Salsa. Peter, why should people vote VP Peter?
Well, the moment that I'm elected, I'll be building up relationships with the membership, with the other stakeholders, and with the other organisations that we need to be working with to achieve wins for our students. A lot of people are sick of the candidates making a lot of promises around election time and not delivering. For me, I would be someone who's committed to actions. And I think a lot of unions, they're struggling financially, they don't feel their voice is heard. So for me, it's really important that we're communicating and that we're getting the message out there to represent further education.
And that brings us to a close. The hustings for the NUS Conference 2020 elections for VP Further Education. Thank you very much indeed, Peter Hopwood from Godalming College Students Association, for joining us. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you very much indeed, Salsa El-Megri from Bradford College Students Union.
Thank you. Hope you have a lovely day.
And thank you very much indeed, Aldrich Gonsalves from Dudley College of Technology Students Union.
Thank you so much for having me today, and goodbye.
So you and the student electorate have a real good think about what you've heard. Consider the proposals that the candidates for VPFE have put forward, and make sure you vote.